Farzaneh Milani, what's your book about?
First, I would like to thank you for giving me the honor to speak with you and to introduce my book to your wonderful audience. I would also like to add that I have a joint appointment with Women's Studies. We call it Studies in Women and Gender at the University of Virginia. I'm very proud to be a member of that department, that program, hopefully a department soon. Words Not Swords is about sex segregation in the Islamic world, in particular Iran. The focus of the book is on Iranian women, although I believe the main thesis can be applied to the Islamic Middle East and North Africa. I have a dual argument in the book. I argue that in the last 160 years, women have been at the forefront of a modernizing movement in Iran and in parts of the Middle East and North Africa by desegregating themselves, by desegregating the social space, by desegregating the dominant discourse. I believe women writers have been at the forefront of this modernizing movement. And I hope we will have the time to discuss why and how. Well, what have been some of the techniques and some of the strategies? In the early years of Islam, I believe women were an active participant in the social life of the community, in the social discourse. There is, in fact, a chapter in the Quran that talks about women who discussed and argued with the Prophet Muhammad. That's how active they were. They went to war. In fact, women, one of the Prophet's wives, was the commander of an army. So in the early years of Islam, women were much more active than they were in the following years. I start in 1848 with the full recognition that social movements, unlike pregnancies, cannot be traced back to a year, to a specific date. But I had to start somewhere, and I thought that congregation in 1848, which is a very important year throughout the world, would be a good place to start. The women who entered a male space with body and voice unveiled was named Tahir Qurratul Ain. She was a poet, and she was a woman who appropriated the pulpit. She allowed herself to reinterpret the scripture. And I continue till post-revolutionary Iran. It is unfortunate that we don't have enough translation of women writers or literary figures from the rest of the world. As you know, the United States of America, the land I love, the land I have adopted as my home, in recent decades has paid less and less attention to translation, especially to literary translation. The number of books translated from the Middle East and North Africa into English are minimal. In the Islamic Republic of Iran, in the last 32 years, there has been a lot more translation of English literature than there has been in America from the land that many consider the enemy.
Is there a contemporary woman writer in Iran that you would recommend for people?
Absolutely. Let me first say that in spite of the Islamic Republic of Iran, or perhaps because of it, there is a renaissance, there is a literary renaissance going on in Iran. And women are at center stage. So women writers were exceptional. Women poets in Iran go back over 1,000 years because poetry is a more women-friendly kind of art form. You can write it in the privacy of your home. You don't need to go to a studio. You don't need directors. You don't need a crew. You don't need. So it's a women-friendly art form, especially in a segregated society. But women novelists were rare. So 1947 is the first major literary prose. And then we had a handful of women novelists. And right now, we have about 370 women novelists in Iran, equal to the number of men. Simin Behbahani, another brave woman, we call her the lioness of Iran, a voice of dissident, a voice of wisdom and fairness, a conscientious witness to Iranian history in the last 6 decades, but especially after the revolution. She is the national poet of our country, not recognized by the government as such, but recognized by the people inside and outside the country as the national poet. And it's the first time a woman has become the national poet in my country of birth. I was born in Tehran, Iran. I have 4 brothers. I'm blessed with 4 brothers. They sent me from early childhood to a French school. I was raised part of my years in Iran by Catholic nuns, and part of it in Mission Laïque.
In France?
In French, in Iran.
Oh, okay.
In Iran, we had wonderful co-educational school run by French people. My parents were not excessively rich, but yes, they belonged to the upper middle class.
Would you consider your family to be a secular family or a devout family?
Well, I don't see life as binary opposites. So these divisions, if you would allow me to say, don't mean much to me. My parents were both Muslim. My father was not a practicing Muslim. I had never seen her pray or fast. But my mother was a practicing Muslim. She prayed, she fasted, she was unveiled, and she was unveiled before the Compulsory Unveiling Act of 1936. She was a liberated woman. I consider myself a student of women's studies, and I think my first teacher was my mother.
When did you come to the United States? Where did you go to university?
I arrived in the United States of America on December 17, 1967. I went to Cal State in Hayward, where I earned a bachelor degree of arts in French literature. Then I moved to UCLA. I studied French literature there too, and I was almost done with my graduate studies, and I knew I was going to write my dissertation on Flaubert, on Madame Bovary, and Flaubert's search for the right word and the ideal woman, when I decided to switch majors to comparative literature. Many of my teachers, except one, Professor Banani, thought that it was a professional suicide of sort to switch from Flaubert to Furugh Farrokhzad. Some of my teachers jokingly told me this. She has an unpronounceable name, as you do, and but it was a labor of love, and eventually became a turning point in my life. And I'm very glad I listened to my heart.
So, Professor Milani, did you stay in the States after that, become a citizen, etc.?
Yes, I have not left this country. After graduation, I had a job offer from Tehran University, the premier institution
Pre-revolution.
in Iran. It was just around the revolutionary time. I graduated in 1979. But because I had worked on women, and my parents didn't think it was a wise thing to return, and by that time I had children, and I loved this country, and so I did not go back. I have lived here since then. I thought it was not wise to go back, neither did my parents. But when the country was liberalized a bit under first President Rafsanjani and then President Khatami, I went back. I visited with family, first and foremost, but I consider women writers and women artists my literary mothers, and so I visited with a number of them. As I told you at the beginning, I believe there is a renaissance, a literary renaissance in Iran. There are many women writers who write beautiful work of art. We have more women directors in the last decade in Iran than we've had in the whole previous 100 years of cinema's history in my country. We have women painters, we have women dancers, singers, I mean, you name it. We have fantastic women actors, as you know, an Iranian movie, fantastic Iranian movie, Separation, won the Oscar this year, and justifiably so. So things are not exactly as they are perceived to be in the US. If we put aside the government of Iran, if we focus on the people of Iran, we will see that a civil rights movement like no other place in the Middle East and North Africa, a literary movement is going on in Iran. If we don't start a war, no one can stop that civil movement in Iran, no one. And I pray that this non-violent movement that has started in Iran would be allowed to flourish. If you would allow me to add, the focus of my book is on non-violent resolution of problems. I refer times and again to my literary foremother, Shahrazad, the ultimate storyteller. I believe in the power of words.
And finally, Professor, what's this photograph on the front of your book?
This is a photograph by one of Iran's foremost visual artists, Shirin Neshat, a dear friend of mine. She very kindly and generously allowed us to use this photograph. It's from one of her films, a fantastic film. And it's a group of women who are veiled, but who are running. And since the central thesis of my book is the issue of freedom of movement, I thought it is a most appropriate, and as you used the word before the interview, a stark photograph. So it's a photograph by Shirin Neshat.